I'd like to welcome you to the Dan John podcast, where your questions are answered and your answers are questioned. I'm here every week bringing you the best and brightest of our field. And me. Episode 4, A New Hope. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, welcome back, folks. Had a great weekend in St. Louis teaching a hardstyle kettlebell challenge and then my own thing on the second day, and it went well, and I'm happy. Just finished a great book on fractals, and fractals have been bouncing around in my head since, wow, it's a long time ago, because Lindsay would have been just a baby, and she's 27 now, so it had been a while ago. And we were down on this vacation, and we had to come back because Lindsay got very ill, Tiff and I. So she had just picked up this paperback called Jurassic Park. And on the so she read it out loud to me. We were not prepared to have to turn around and come right back. We came to that section where they talk about fractals in the book. Michael Crichton's 2 books, Lost World and Jurassic Park, are some of the best could we should be scenarios I've ever. The movies are fine. The books are amazing. And that's when I first heard about fractals. And it hit me right then that it was a great model for coaches and training. In the book, he says basically, you have a day that's haphazard, and then you have another day that's haphazard, and then you're 78 years old and you look back in your life and it just seems to be haphazard. And he goes, so fractals are those little patterns that continue to repeat, and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. A tiny rock looks like a mountain. A leaf looks like a tree. I guess there's that great J.R.R. Tolkien read, Leaf by Niggle. If you keep draw enough pictures of leaves, pretty soon you have a tree. Oh, why do I even say that? Because it's also a perfect way to look at training and many things about life. So I just finished Mandelbrot's book on fractals. He's the guy who came up with the math. Nassim Taleb loves the work too. And I agree with it. Taleb calls them power laws, but there's a moment in the book where he talks about change, and he talks about there's 3 kinds of change: mild, wild, and no. And as I looked over programs that worked in my career and careers and for other people, I began to notice something interesting, is that there are programs that work really well because there are these tiny, mild changes. One of the strange things about why I think easy strength works so well, first, and this is the most important, is that for many people, it's the first time you ever worked on this quality called strength. So miracles happen when you focus on strength. But as you go through the 40 days of basically doing the same thing every single day, 5 days a week, the mild changes are you add a little bit of load when the weight feels light. Or if you feel like going a little heavier, but you don't think you can get 5 reps, well, then you do 3 reps. It's not crazy at all. It's mild. If you're on a traditional park bench program, like you can get at the website, which I think our park bench generator might be the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Thank you, Brian. I had nothing to do with it, folks. But it is literally, you're inside my brain, so be careful up there. But what you'll notice when you're doing a traditional park bench workout is that when you change from something like a half kneeling press to a standing press, there's no huge difference there, but you add more load or another rep, or you lay down to a 1-arm bench, and you notice the next day soreness in all kinds of places you'd forgotten. Mild changes that you can continue doing. And then there's the other extreme, wild. And I was thinking about this. I've always thought I missed the boat from a genius insight from the great Olympic lifter and Mr. Universe, Tommy Kono. 8 weeks out from weightlifting meet, he put himself on an extremely structured 8-week program. He would lift in the meet, and the following Monday, start bodybuilding again. That's a wild change. A better example might be a blessing that happened in my life. And when I got back from the Middle East, I hurt my back terribly. And I wish it was more heroic than this, but I picked up a typewriter and my back just went out. So for over a year, I couldn't lift weights. So because I have a little bit of psychoticness in myself, my doctor said the best thing I could do was learn to do bilateral swimming and ride a bike. And I figured, well, if I'm going to swim and ride, I might as well run and go do triathlons. So I did sprint triathlons for about a 2-year period. When I finally was whole again, it's weird about backs. If you've ever had a back injury, one day you're fine. Then it's like it never happened. I'm like, okay. But it was a good year, year and a half, maybe even up to 2. When I went back into the weight room, I was a whole new person because that was a wild change from Olympic lifting and throwing the discus every day. And then there's a third kind of change called no. And I think there's a secret to no. A lot of you are going to hear no change like, well, that's a bad thing. No, no, no. No change are the good habits that you have. For example, on my pirate map, every night I'm concerned with my sleep hygiene, making sure I do certain things right before I go to bed, winding it down, making sure I do certain things in a certain order. Once again, this morning, what woke me up was the coffee maker going off at 5:30. I try to eat 8 vegetables a day. Now, you could say, well, why don't you go don't eat any vegetables for a decade and then eat 1,000 a day? That would be a wild change. And I can see the value of that. But when we're talking about certain things like health and longevity, no change is probably better. Going to the dentist 3 times a year, over and over and over and over and over again, is far better than never going to the dentist and then trying to catch up with daily visits for a year after your teeth are rotted to the core. So it's to me, this little fractal toolkit is really valuable in all areas of your life. There are places for the mild change. I would argue for most people with their fitness goals, mild change is what you want. In exercise selection, same but different. In reps and sets, vary the numbers. You should be doing about 15 to 25 reps generally in most exercises most of the time. But that's 3 sets of 8, or it's 5 sets of 5, or it's 8 sets of 3, or it's 5 sets of 3. Those are mild fluctuations. In performance, so let's review this. In health and longevity, I would suggest get the best habit you can by the age of 4 and just stick to them the rest of your life. Oh boy, that's good advice right there. Wear your seatbelt, floss your teeth, all those silly, don't smoke, all those very basic things, and do them the rest of your life. No change. Mild change in the areas of fitness. In the area of performance, you might have to throw in some wild changes. Maybe, and many of my good friends who are elite discus throwers, almost all of them to a person said they retired, took a season off, went to one track meet maybe as a lark, threw almost as well as they'd ever thrown in their life, and rebooted their system because that was a wild change. So I want to share that with you this week. Thanks so much for sending in questions. We have 3 this week, and I want to read them to you. Question number 1 comes from our good friend Tim. Hi, Dan. I'm wondering how you would approach a year-long plan to coach Olympic lifters now. Is there a place for park bench workouts in a recreational lifters program? Boy, I read that and I almost want to say, yep, in a recreational lifters plan, there's absolutely a place for park bench workouts. We talked about this a while ago. Somebody asked me, is there an easy strength approach to the Olympic lifts? And I said, sure. You'd want to snatch, clean and jerk, and front squat for about a 2-week period. And then a 2-week period, go snatch, clean and jerk, and farmer walk. And just repeat that over and over. And in the workouts themselves, I would use the rule of 10. Probably in the snatches and the clean and jerks, you probably only want to do maybe just 5 or 6 snatches, maybe after warm-ups. After your warm-ups, 5 or 6 quality snatches. And after warm-ups, probably only maybe 3 clean and jerks because of the hit they put on your body. And then your front squats could be 5 sets of 2. After 2 weeks of that, probably the same rep and set scheme in the clean and jerk and snatch. And then just a daily farmer walk, sled pull, some kind of loaded carry just to change things up. Now, you ask about park bench. I like the idea of doing something like that, but if you're not a good Olympic lifter or you need conditioning of another sort, you might want to mix it up a little bit. Let's see on the next part of your question if I can cover that. My own situation is this. I'm 34, I lift at home, and I learned the Olympic lifts years ago, but only started training with them a year ago. I'm using Dave Turner's beginners program, which you can find folks in our from the ground up in the members area. We'll have that program for you. I'm using Dave Turner's beginners program after completing Mass Made Simple, and the goal is to lift in some low-level meets. Well, that's actually kind of brilliant, Tim. You're scaring me here. The park bench programs have got me thinking about, would there be a place for them for a lifter like me, but I'm not sure how to fit all of that together. And then he credits us for such a great website, but the truth is you really should thank Brian, okay? I like your idea here. Is it a good idea for an Olympic lifter to do Mass Made Simple in their career? Yeah, I think that's not a bad idea. You do this bus bench program where you drive, you get all those high rep squats. I would suggest not eating as much as you would on a usual mass program. And then after that, with using the Dave Turner program, you'll probably be able to use that up to probably 3 months, take a break, 3 or 4 months, take a break, and then you're probably done with it. Because it is a beginner's program, it is based on learning everything. It's really is practice. Every workout is practice. Snatch is 8 sets of 2. Clean and jerk is 8 sets of 1. Front squats were 5 sets of 5. Now they're 5 sets of 2, which I wish we would have done when I did the program. And then the military press for 5 sets of 3. Very basic program, very simple program, and it takes care of business. At 34, you're right there on the cusp about how much other stuff like general hypertrophy work you might need. But honestly, you might be getting it from the front squat and the military press. Those two by themselves might be taking care of business. My only concern about staying on the beginning program too long is you will get stale. But yeah, I mean, honestly, in a sense, when I did the Dave Turner program, it was for me a park bench program, because if I'm taking one weight and doing it for 8 doubles in the snatch, for example, I'm not so concerned about going up. It's one weight. So I just want to make sure I can get the lifts, those 16 reps. So it does become kind of park benchy. One thing you'll find in a program like this, you'll be able to lift a lot more. Your competition lifts will be much more than your practice lifts. Very much like what we learned with the Big 21 program, which is one of the things on the bus bench program site. So, hey, I like where you're going. I hope I answered some of the questions. But you might want to consider my variation for you. So the Dave Turner program, no question about that, that works. And then slide to the snatch, clean and jerk, front squat 2 weeks, snatch, clean and jerk, farmer walk for 2 weeks. I hope that helped. And if it sounds confusing, I apologize. But we just talked about basically a 1-year program, and I tried to simplify it as best I can. But once you do it, it really does become much more simple, because you're just showing up and taking care of biz. Okay, our next question comes from Ben, which is a nice name. Hey, love the podcast, the website, and the workouts. A lot. Well, good. That's high praise. A lot. Wondering if you could cover rest weeks, deloading weeks. I always feel like this is one of those questions where, what do you mean by that? I think the genius of Jim Wendler's 5-3-1 program is he's got enough experience and he's got an insight that when he talks about his every week 4 is always a deload. But it always comes back to one point people might miss. When you're talking about deloading, you got to make sure you're coming at it from a high enough place. Again, the reason I think so many people fail at easy strength is they've never gotten strong before. That's a weird sentence to say, but it's true. So generally, I talk about this. If you go to the gym 4 times a month and you bench 200 pounds, I call that the sort of max. If you get serious about it and you put everything you have into training for 6 months and you drive your bench up to 300 pounds, that's your max. With the max, we can start talking about deloading a little bit. But then you got a situation where you're at the nationals, and if you make this lift, you're the national champion. And if you miss it, you go home in flames. I call that the max. Generally, good lifters have a story about their best lifts. My friend Dave Tate, who's a genius, he says that if he sees a weightlifting program where you go above 90% in the first, I want to say 51 weeks, he throws it out the window because you don't know what strong is. And I thought, wow. So one of the things about deloading is this. If you're on that beginner's early rise, you don't need to deload. Basically, you've been deloading most of your life. Now you're loading. But there's going to come a time, and you'll see it with the numbers, where you start to get a little stale. That's when you have to naturally take the tension off. I always use the image of a bow and arrow. You know, I'm pulling. Pulling more isn't going to make the arrow go farther. I got to let it go. So there are times for natural let it goes. For most people I know, their life deloads for them. That vacation you take to Cancun, there's your deload. When you go to Devin's wedding, there's your deload. The 2 weeks of Christmas when you got the kids in the house, Ben, I don't know your situation, but most of us naturally have these deload and off periods every year, naturally. Once you move up into the bigger numbers, you have to build in deloads. And I'm speaking, of course, about natural athletes only. You have to build in the deloads because you have to. Now, if you're like Marty Gallagher, 12 weeks you train up for the meet, and then I don't see you anymore. You focus on going for long walks and eating good food. That is how he deloads. Jim Wendler, 1, 2, 3, deload. 1, 2, 3, deload. 1, 2, 3, deload. The key is this, Ben, is you have to look at your life and your schedule. I always suggest get that big map from Office Max, the one that has January, February, March, April, and then just go in naturally. And I would take a red pen and X out those areas where you're gone, vacation, anniversary weekend, those kinds of things, where it's probably not a good idea to train at the highest levels. Then take a yellow highlighter and highlight those, those weeks with issues. And then finally find those areas with the green pen and the green highlighter and X those out. And those are the months or weeks you go for it. And most people I work with, normal people, they see naturally there's more red sometimes than any other color. With some people, it's always yellow. And then with some people, they've got clean green holes. If you have green holes, green areas on your map, those when you do bus bench programs. Yellow is when you do the park bench programs, and red is natural deload. If you're good enough, then you have to stick those deloads in. I like Wendler's idea, and I wish I'd have done more of this. With every 4th week, you go in, you do the movements, you drop the load down, you drop the reps down as low as 60% with very easy rep schemes, and just do the movements, feel good for a week, and then go back after it the next week. I know it's vague, and the reason it's vague is because there's so many pieces of information you need to understand a deload week. I hope that helped. Joey, we got a question from Joey. Hi, Dan. Hi, Joey. I was wondering about the Big 21 program and transformation program. Where would you work in the groundwork and loaded carries? I can answer that right now in the Big 21. You don't. In the Big 21, you clean and press, you snatch, you clean and jerk 3 days a week. And on the other 2 days, you weep in your soup about how miserable you feel, if done correctly. With the transformation program, you've got to remember both of these programs are pre my broken wrist. Now, they're good programs, but it was with my broken wrist when I couldn't do anything at all. I could front squat with one arm. I had to do something else, and I started picking up bags and carrying them. So these are both programs based before we did this. At the end of the transformation program, I used to say, and now do ab work. And we were on the ground doing all kinds of things. I would now throw in farmer walks, just so it'd be, let's do the Olympic day. Let's do the squat day. Overhead squat, 3 sets of 8. Front squat, 3 sets of 8. Maybe 1 or 2 serious sled pulls. Actually, it's funny, in that program, we kind of had them built in. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we ran hills. You might say that's not a loaded carry, but there's some really good things from hill sprints. So Big 21, don't even think about anything else. Transformation program, let's do it this. Let's just make this statement and stick with it forever. Transformation program, Tuesdays and Thursdays are groundwork and loaded carries. There, boom, it has been said. And it's funny, he says this right here. Or would you not recommend it because of the intensity? And then thank you, Joey, for being so honest. As you can tell, I haven't ran either program. Boy, isn't that funny? Until you've done a program, I don't think you should really comment on it. I'm not being a jerk at all. But we always laugh about, so we had tested for these articles I wrote about the 10,000 swing challenge. And on so it was when we were about 39,500 swings. So we did, remember, folks, I did 40,000 swings to write that article. 40,000 swings to write that article. That's a lot of swings to write an article. And on the very last day, someone shows up at the gym and says, I have a better idea. And I'm like, I can tell you one thing on the heart. You haven't done the 10,000 swing challenge yet, because the idea was not good. And then obviously, now I recommend a much different template for what I did originally, because once we had done all the swings, thought about it and came back to it, I had a wonderful insight how to make it better. But Joey, your point is right. Do the transformation program as written, just as written, and maybe 2 weeks into it, add, remember, as written is the hill sprints on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then maybe 2 weeks into it, add those loaded carries and see if it has any effect at all. Okay. Thanks again. I've got a question from Keith, and Keith, this is going to be, I don't really want to answer this question, but let me do it. Could you discuss programming for the pistol squat? No. The problem with the pistol squat is that I worked with a lot of athletes, and when I did that one kettlebell cert and came back, I noticed immediately the same thing I'd seen my whole life. If you can pistol squat, you can pistol squat. If you can't, you can't. I hate to say that I'm an expert in hips, but I know I've had 2 major hip surgeries, and I'm all titanium. I can do a pistol now because I have a perfect, socket, ball and socket. It's like lunges. A friend of mine, Pavel, used to say that if you can lunge. Check that. If you can lunge, you don't need to lunge. If you can't lunge, you don't need to lunge. I feel the same way about the pistol squat. I get it. I understand it. And certain things you might want to do it. Like if you're doing that balancing thing you see at the parks people do, there might be value to that. But you are born to pistol squat, and programming for it, I'm just not that. There are other people who you'd want to talk to. I'm not the guy. I honestly don't see any value in it at all, and I never have. Um, it I'm there's no way I can come off as a nice person right now, but I just think it's one of those things. Good for you if you can do it, but there is no world championships pistol squatting. They don't get Olympic gold for it, and literally you're born to do it or not. So I, it's a cool trick, and it looks good when you're doing it on your skateboard. I think, in fact, I think it's very impressive when you do it on your skateboard. But for my needs and the bulk of the people I work for, there is no value to them, and I'm sorry. Remember, folks, this podcast, and if you want questions, please remember podcast at danjohnworkouts.com for the questions. This podcast is driven by your questions. I thought this week's questions were very good. Even a question like Keith's, where I can't answer it basically, is still a good question because it allows me to give some vision on some things. Each and every week, I'm here to answer your questions. Keep sending them in. I love you. Talk to you soon.